saying that yeah, he really was amazing and saying that it was fine, he would sign. Calix just laughed while Diddy kept thinking that for now, this boy was too much for him to handle. After signing, he asked what they were going to do, and our boy said they were heading straight to the capital. Next scene, that sucker Gerard. Bye to you, my guy. Krot asks if he knew everything was going to happen like that, and our boy says he had no idea at all. He just knows they're going to need more support. And obviously, right now, the most influential person is the first son of the Majesty, who soon will become king. His Highness is known as Prince Gale. Krot, however, wants to know if this is going to work out. They gave up the shield, which, whether they liked it or not, was protecting this place. To which Calix replies that he doesn't have to worry because their support hasn't diminished. In fact, he believes this was a perfect deal for 60,000 in gold. He might not have realized it yet, but soon he'd understand what he was talking about. Next scene, one of the leaders from the tomb says he stole everything, tells the Viscount there's something urgent to report. He tells him to speak up, and the guy says all the merchants from Murda disappeared. Besides that, it seems the resources they had, the books and all, have already been sold. In memory, another guy opens the door saying that the people from Murda were robbed by the debt collectors and there's a commotion going on. Some instructors were at Golda Fortress and others vanished. And lastly, a big part of them was found dead. The leader of the fools just stays silent, which makes him start trembling. Then someone else enters the room. Look at that crowded little place. He apologizes but says he's going in because things are happening. He then says that in that region of Shiken, a week ago the forces went there along with Gerard. All of them were arrested, but now he went to check the prison and couldn't find the guy. It's already been confirmed that he disappeared. They tried to track where he went, but apparently all of this had already been planned. The old man closes the book and wonders why that guy is fleeing to Shiken territory. He's definitely not dumb enough to think he could escape. Then he laughs and says they really were smarter than them. He calls for the chubby guy and tells him to send someone to Golda Fortress. Someone who can confirm that the secret is safe. The chubby guy wants to know, right? What's the secret he doesn't even know about? What do they have to confirm? The Viscount says obviously he's talking about the silver, which leaves the guy confused because everyone knows that silver is supposedly buried. The Viscount says that's exactly why it's within the order. He's ordering them to go there and dig to find out if the silver is or isn't there. They were to use any necessary method. Then he sends the squad leader to bring back the guys who went to Shiken territory. Also, if the spies they sent had their identities discovered, they'd probably already flood the territory. The guy is confused, right? Are they supposed to go after them and find out? Are they supposed to do what? After all, he didn't say they fled. He says to leave a boat monitoring the Aran Lake region. If no one goes through there in 2 weeks, they'll know the people are still hiding in that territory, and eventually, the chance for him to take revenge will show up. Then he already goes on telling everyone to get ready, because they were going to talk with Marcus Antonio. The scene already shifts the man's castle. This Antonio guy says that even he, who's so much of a perfectionist, apparently sometimes fails. To which the Viscount replies it's nothing serious, just a small mistake that will soon disappear. But another guy seems not to believe it, saying that apparently times are rough, lots of things are going wrong. The Viscount comments that this is a great opportunity to kill that Shiken guy. If someone like him were to ally with the king, the balance of the region would be completely destroyed. Antonio replies that even if they regret it, now there's no going back. But at the very least, they should make sure to find out who was the bastard that stole the money, and why that kid from that Shiken guy helped him escape. Maybe they should fabricate a justification and declare war on him. The Viscount hesitates and asks the Marquis what he thinks about diplomatic pressure. He tells him to explain, and he says that he took a look, and it seems that the Shiken family hasn't placed new representatives in the Council of Nobles. Servius was one of the people who worked for them, and they could use this guy before he loses the position. The Marquis tells him to explain the details while thinking that avoiding war is always good. However, man, our boy Calix already knows very well and comments that soon they'll want to put diplomatic pressure on them. At the very least, they must already know they were betrayed by Gerard. Besides, obviously, it was our boy who helped him escape. Krot says he understands that war is bad for everyone, but how would they put diplomatic pressure on this place? Calix explains that this is very normal. The lords don't leave their castles unless it's a war where if they lose everything. Normally, they stay at a distance in the political game trying to increase influence. Krot responds that that's why apparently the so-called Council of Nobles exists and asks if they shouldn't send a representative. Wow, the boy says they obviously need to send one and asks who theirs is. Krot says it's Ursel and immediately realizes that Guy is one of the people closest to Stella. Right away, he already gets that this is going to be a huge problem. What he doesn't understand is why Calix is so calm. Oh, the rascal likes that 5th dimension chess and says that in a battle it's always good to leave some intentional openings. That way, not only will you know where your enemy will aim, but he'll also think you're weak. Meanwhile, in the royal capital of Eusenia, a gigantic city with over 250,000 inhabitants, the heart of the empire and where King Clivio Carcal lives, on his throne, Clivio asks what the topic of the day is. I don't know if it's just my impression or if I'm crazy, but doesn't it seem like all the villains are kind of from the same family? Like that guy there, the Viscount, seems like he could be a brother of this younger one here. The king obviously wants to talk about the succession of the Shikan region. In the same sentence, he says it's very sad that the guy died and already asks, right, who's going to inherit. At that, someone stands up and tells him not to worry, that the representative of the Shikan region named Ursel was there. The king says that's fine and asks him to explain the situation. Ursel says that currently that place is facing a big mess. All the people there were anxious and worried. That's because Kalix Shikan used military power to take control of the place. He falsely accused Countess Stella of murder and arrested her. On top of that, he sealed the mana of his own half-brother. The king has a face like he couldn't care less about that, but says that's kind of unusual and asked him to explain himself. As far as he had heard, the boy isn't some madman. Orsu says he's someone who has already tried to take his own life a few times, so there are some mental challenges going on in the boy's life. Hades is just thinking that this guy must believe he hasn't gone through more than 30 years of court sessions to notice when someone is lying or making things up. It seems like he fought alongside Kalix's father for a while and just thinks that the chubby son was supposed to take over. If Kalix took it by force, he already likes the kid. That's what he says, that if he took it by force with military power, someone in that territory supports him. There's no way to take over a territory with no help at all. So is Ursel then saying that maybe all the knights of Shikan territory are crazy following the command of a madman? Now the guy is already trembling, right man? The king is the real deal and didn't even need anything, just solved it by himself. So that's that, right? However, someone else calls out to His Majesty and says that falsely accusing someone of murder in addition to sealing the mana of your own half-brother is clearly a serious abuse of power. The king goes to say something and the fat guy already stands up, saying they have to summon Kalix to come to the capital. The House of Lords would be responsible for evaluating the physical and mental condition he's in. The king knows that he couldn't really trust the House of Lords, but says that fine, for now he agrees to summon him to the capital. But the investigation would be conducted by the palace administration. However, so they don't get upset, the House of Lords could send someone to accompany the process. The sucker just accepts it, right man? What else can he do? It's the king's word. Already outside, he goes to talk with the guy on the horse and explains that they have a big problem. For some reason, he has no idea the king was protecting that kid Kalix. Maybe it was fear that they would gain more influence in the Shikan region. Ah, look at the bastard hiding over there, Defy, saying it's all good, that this isn't a big problem. Ursel wants to know, right, why it's not a problem. And at that, the Viscount tells Ursel to become the king's son-in-law. In other words, he's ordering him to give up his daughter, and Ursel immediately understands, asking if he's really suggesting giving his child to a dying old man. But the Viscount says he has a slightly longer-term plan. He's not referring to the current king. Maybe in 10 years or 5 years, who knows? Right away, Ursel gets it and says that if that's the case, maybe it's worth it. Haha, because he traded off his daughter like that, man, in 3 words. A few days later in Shikan territory, a royal decree had arrived. Our boy tells them to read it, but Kraut is standing there a bit hesitant. Kalix just says he already knows what it is, so he should just speak up. And his friend says that the royal palace administration was summoning him there to explain the accusations he was receiving. Lauren wants to know which ones, and the guy says it seems that when you try to take your own life, you damage your soul, and they need to check if the soul is intact. Kalix laughs, asking if apparently they're accusing him of going crazy. But he says it's fine, they don't even need to answer that nonsense. Just tell Russell to come up with an excuse and goodbye. Obviously, everyone is shocked, right man? It's an order from the king, and is he planning on defying his highness? Damn, this boy is bold and asks why he have to run out of this house in a panic just because the king summoned him. Besides that, they're trying to prove he's crazy. I'm not sure, but this smells like Viscount Serve and the people trying to set him up. If they couldn't prove anything, they'd probably be killed on the way. That way, their original goal would finally be achieved. Kraut and Thomas say it's madness that they plan to kill a direct descendant like that, but they didn't have to worry. They would risk their lives to make sure it didn't happen. Our boy stretches out in the chair, relaxed, saying that the ones who don't have to worry are them. That's because he's not going anywhere. Besides, they had already sent someone to the capital to fight in their place. The guys ask if he's really talking about Gerard. 2 weeks later, back in the capital, someone slams the table calling for the king, asking what action they're going to take to resolve this Shikan issue. They'd received a message, and they weren't coming to the capital. He's definitely planning something unscrupulous. The king asks what this supposed big plan of the boy is. Antonio replies that the boy destroyed the mana of the true heir. And now that retribution was about to fall on him, he was afraid. This was a very serious problem. The king says he agrees and wants to know then what they're going to do, Gamut. The guys nearby are seeing that the poor guy is getting screwed going against the king. Antonio then says not to worry. He personally would go visit that place and investigate the matter. Apparently, the king just thanks him, saying that he really is a very proactive person. Then the little butler beside him says it's time to go to the next topic. However, when he looks at the agenda, he seems shocked by the information. It was about the marriage of the 5th prince. That one was scared and surprised by the excitement. Must have been trying to use his daughter too. Didn't work out. Huh, bastard. The king comments that he heard the Marquis's daughter is intelligent and beautiful. Maybe it'd be a good idea for her to join with the 5th prince. Obviously, the chubby guy already gets all excited, saying this would be the greatest honor for his family. But then Altumor stands up angrily, telling his majesty to understand that usually the prince has to choose from the girls that are already in the waiting line. Man, apparently there's some sort of royal lineup and he has to interact with the noble girls first. Antonio was all excited. I'm still not understanding the competition going on between this nobility crowd, but I know that offering up the daughters seems to be the top priority. And then the king asks Altumor if he's saying that the Marquis' daughter, by any chance, is inferior. The guy tries to argue about traditions and such, but already gets scolded by the king, right man? Saying it's best not to question his authority in this place. Ah, hold up now, right? The guy got scared, but now I'm starting to get it. It seems the royal folks were supporting the first prince. Who's that dude with the black hair, all swag out, golden shoulder pads? But from what the king said, he's wanting to make the other prince, right? The fifth one, the heir. Only problem is, since the royal supporters are backing the first one, if the king puts the fifth on the throne, they're screwed, right? You see it, right? He's dropping the little piece there of the king. It's like they've been abandoned by the king. But just at that moment, the door opens and the first prince walks in. In your first appearance, you look tougher. Now you're all skinny. He comes in saying there's something he needs to inform the king about. But man, the king just replies that he doesn't recall summoning him. So it'd be best if he disappeared from there immediately. Well, man, but the kid steps forward and says not until the king hears him. Obviously, the king just asks if his authority is being challenged. The kid plays dumb, saying he's not challenging any order. But of course, the king says that not leaving the room is disobedience and warns that he won't let him interfere with Seal's marriage. The kid then says he has no intention of getting involved in any of that. In fact, he came to deal with a completely different matter. And it was something he believes all the nobles there needed to hear. The king tells him to speak then if it's really that important. Then the first prince pulls out a sheet of paper and says it's about the current government of the Shikan reign. It was a message that came from Viscount Russell Meagle. The king is wondering why. To him, that Shikan business was already settled. Egghead over there in the corner, though, says it doesn't matter how far the Shikans are, they should have at least sent a messenger to explain why they weren't going to show up. But then they comment that they also need to remember whose mana was sealed. Since it was someone related to Marcus Antonio, it would be unfair. The chubby guy stands up, saying they don't even trust him. But Egghead just says that the person who will benefit from Shikan's fall being the one to go there and judge him is kind of unfair. Antonio asks why they're trying to trust this so-called Viscount Russell. What if he's someone who's already working under Calix, who's suspected of being a criminal? But the other guy already jumps in saying that this Russell was the leader of the Blue Lions, an extremely honorable soldier who upheld the spirit of justice. Besides that, he received the Royal Order of Honor. In a country called the Land of Knights, it would be ridiculous not to trust someone like that. Antonio realizes he's running out of options and won't be the one to investigate Calix. The king tells everyone to calm down and says he's sure Antonio didn't mean that Russell couldn't be trusted. The chubby guy's looking kind of awkward there, not knowing what to do. But then the first prince asks why don't they examine the content of the letter. The king says fine, but he'll read it aloud. The letter came from Russell and said that in that place there really was an assassination attempt. And Prince Granvini, whose plans were uncovered and was going to be executed, sealed his own mana as the price. All the punishments were carried out and delivered by him and Russell himself, the regional representative. In addition, all the knights agree unanimously, and that was their response to the Council of Lords. Suddenly, someone in the back asks to verify the signature. It's that Marquis Souvenir, who says he once served under Russell and knows his handwriting. Seems like that Marquis was one of the kingdom's big shots, and it seems he really admires Russell a lot. He replies that there's no doubt at all that this is Russell's handwriting. Now Antonio realizes he's screwed. How is he supposed to counter what the prince said, what Russell said, and now what the Marquis confirmed? Not to mention that damn first prince showed up the perfect time and has drawn a lot of attention. A new battle for succession is clearly about to start. The cursed actor doesn't give up, man. He says that even with all this confirmed, they still need to know who actually tried to assassinate Granvini. They couldn't just trust what a low-level assassin said. They'd need physical evidence. The bald guy, however, says they can't leave that place without someone in charge. Antonio agrees and says that Calix, who's only 15, from what he heard the boy doesn't even have the skill to become a knight. To him, someone who owns a territory should at the very least be a sword master. Egghead laughs, asking if he really thinks the boy was going to be a sword master at 15. As far as he knows, Antonio himself only reached that rank at 50. Ah, it was all part of Dirty Antonio's plan, who says he agrees. But at the very least, the boy should prove he has some potential, reaching the level of a user. One of them is thinking that Carlinhos is 15 now. It'll take at least 3 or 4 years for him to become a Class 4 user. That might seem like a long time, but no one there is looking to start a war right now. Especially with the wedding coming up, they just want to push this issue down the road. The king then says that it's settled. The nobility would form an investigation team to look further into the assassination. And if any evidence was found, then they would take disciplinary action. This would remain in place until the moment Calix became a Class 4 user. When that happened, the investigation team would be disbanded and succession would move forward. Antonio says it's a very wise decision, while thinking that these idiots have no idea who Calix really is. They think he must be a talented youth, but he knows how weak and talentless that idiot is. It would take years and years for him to reach Class 4, if he ever did at all, which created the perfect setup for them. Finally, he was seeing the opportunity to put an end to those cursed shikens. That same afternoon, a guy named Lanciana went to speak with Antonio, asking why he was summoned. Antonio says he has a favorite ask, and it's something that the servant mustn't notice. The guy explains that it's going to be hard because this man is very alert, but obviously not impossible. Antonio says it doesn't matter. What he wants is for that guy to suffer a little. The man asks how, and he just tells him to use one of the Black Knights as always. It would be perfect to use the same one as before. After all, not getting your hands dirty in a situation like this is always the best move. Lanciana just bows, saying he understood and he's going to handle it. That same night in Gale's castle, the sucker Diddy is talking to the first prince. And the prince is saying that this plan was perfect. The moment His Majesty abandoned the royal faction, he stepped forward and united them once again. Really unusual. No one would have thought of it. Obviously, Diddy is confused. After all, he has no idea how Calix knew all this was going to happen. The problem is he doesn't want the prince to know it was all Calix's plan. So he says he foresaw all this because he's familiar with those guys' methods. This first prince isn't quite right in the head either. Every panel he's draped in gold, man. And he's saying that his time as an advisor must have really come in handy. Besides that, everyone in that castle now must be holding their heads, not knowing what to do. The boy, though, tells him to calm down. They landed a good blow, but the other side still got what they wanted. The engagement of the fifth prince still hadn't been broken. The prince wants to know how they're going to put an end to that, because obviously Gerald says it's going to be difficult. A royal wedding is the personification of a king's will. There wasn't much he could do, so unfortunately it's a shame, but he has no idea to give. The guy replies that it's all right. He was just thinking out loud and didn't think he'd actually have a plan. The only problem now is that he would start becoming a target. Garrett tells him not to worry. Now that he's stepped out from the king's shadow, he's become the sky that will light up all the nobility. With the support of almost the entire table, still of royal blood, for sure he's confident that most will follow him. The prince is excited, saying that just being the savior of the people sounds amazing. Besides that, he's thinking about making the Shikan territory part of their faction. Gerard says it's not a bad idea since Russell is an icon to many, and since he personally delivered the letter, it would make total sense. However, at the same time, they didn't need to give too many good things. It's not necessary to feed a fish twice after it's already been caught. The prince says he's confused. It was Kenwright, Gerard, who brought the letter from Russell. So why don't they seem that close? Gerard explains that delivering the letter was just to settle a debt he had. Nothing more than a transaction. Right then, the first prince gives him a stare, right man? Caught red-handed sucker. Said he made the whole plan, and now he admits he was just doing a transaction. He's already trembling, saying that this guy's eyes were just like Calix's. Every time that bastard looked at him with that face, it felt like he was staring into his soul. And then the first prince is already walking past, saying to get ready because he's heading to Shikan territory. Gerard, confused, wants to know if he's going personally. The prince says yes, he doesn't care if they reject him there. Besides, just interacting with that territory is going to seriously irritate Seal, who's the next successor. Gerard, though, realizes he's losing his chance. He wanted the prince to be interested in the wisdom he has. So why all of a sudden is he going to visit Shikan like that? The problem is, he can't stop it. And if he tries anything, it'll look suspicious. So he just bows and says, as you wish. A few days later, someone asks if Calix heard. He asks, heard what? And Russell says there are people out there saying he needs to become a Class 4 as fast as possible. Our boy says not to worry, he already has an idea how to do that. Seems like he's looking for some dungeons to form on the map, but it's tough. Russell, however, is super hyped, saying you don't need to be smart to get strong, man. All he needs to do is take one step each day as fast as possible. He was going to make sure the boy would be Class 4 soon. Calix is all shaking there, and Russell already grabs him by the arm, saying it's time for training. Next scene, out in the field, everyone's scared, even covering their faces and trembling, man. Another attack comes right at Calix's face, with Russell yelling for him to look up. Obviously, he takes it full on and is knocked out on the ground. Seems like the beatings in training are intense. He wonders if at this pace he's not going to end up dead in this other world. Next day, birds chirping in the morning and Russell's already waking him up, saying it's time for training. But man, the boy is completely wrecked and says he has to realize he has no skill for this. But the trainer says he doesn't need talent to master the sword. Anyone would become Class 5 if they train diligently, and he's proof of that. Calix, the last if training this much isn't bad for the body, he's going to stunt his growth. He shows his injuries, and yeah, the boy got beat up all day long. But the trainer just says that injuries at that level can be healed with a low-level potion. Calix replies that they can't afford to buy potions. The territory is going through a serious financial crisis. But of course the guy says that thanks to him, that's a thing of the past. Now he'd rested enough, and it was time to get back to training. He yells that he hates this, but there he is again, holding his little sword, and another of Russell's attacks coming his way. At least now for the first time he was seeing the movement of the sword, which doesn't mean much since even seeing it, he still took a full hit to the head and ended up thinking how beautiful this guy was. Suddenly, he says to himself that he can't keep living like this. He has to get out of this situation soon and think of a way to escape it. Yeah, when he thinks of a girl, Oops, missing our assassin, huh? She left and never came back. We really need a new one. He says he needs the strongest and first ally of the prince. She seemed to be the most skilled person in the game when it came to money. However, she and the first prince hadn't met yet at this point, which means maybe he can steal her. He's all excited. Russell obviously tells him to stop stalling and already pulls him by the arms. But just then our boy yells out that he has something really important to say. Of course, the old man warns that he won't accept any excuse to make him rest. If he tried to make anything up, trading time would be increased tenfold. He had to understand that they stole 100,000 in silver bars, but they weren't using them. At the moment, they were useless, since they couldn't sell them, or it would be obvious, which obviously put them in a risky position, since anyone would want to steal them. The protagonist says that's exactly why they need someone to launder that money. Russell knows this kid is definitely making this up just to stop training, but unfortunately, it really is a problem. But he asks if they really need to do this now. Our boy says the plan is to lend those gold bars to someone and profit from the interest man. Not just interest, compound interest, which was better than magic. Russell says he's never heard of this so-called magic of compound interest, but our boy tells him to trust. It's amazing. He replies fine, since it would be good to get rid of those bars soon. He wants to know how long it'll take. Calix, who knows he can't say too long, but also can't say too short, says maybe 3 months. He thinks he made the perfect offer. This way it'd be impossible for Russell to refuse. But Russell, of course he's no fool, already realizes he's kinda being tricked. But with no real choice because of the bars, he says he'll leave it to Krot to be responsible for his daily training. Calix says there's no need to go that far, but obviously Russell says that's the bare minimum. Next morning, Krot says he has a very interesting piece of news. Seems like the first prince was heading there. Calix wants to know why, and he says this guy is going through a succession war. And it looks like he's coming to take this territory and annex it. Right away, Calix is already getting ready and asks what the problem is. Wow, the guy said they didn't know that man. It'd be best to prepare the carriages and horses quickly. They were leaving in 2 hours. Krot asks how our boy's going to do that. He doesn't even know how to ride a horse yet. He just shuts the suitcase and says he'll learn on the way. Let's go, man. Our boy says everyone knows very well the name of that bastard. Gale Roshula Clevio Krakow. What a big name. And it seems he's one of the few hero-level people in this game. 29 years old, from the royal family with a reputation of mystery and currently low support. But of course, what's strong about him is down there, that SSS-rank military talent man. And Calix isn't running away because he's afraid to fight the prince, but because he knows how cunning the prince is when it comes to recruiting people. If he meets him, he'll definitely end up getting recruited by this guy. And with that, he already turns to Krot and tells him to shut up and just go. Krot is still a bit confused about what he's saying and already remembers the beatings he'll get from Russell if he doesn't keep up with the boy properly. So he yells out, asking the prince to wait. 2 hours later, Calix is in front of the house, pointing at the other one, wanting to know where the bastard is. He told the bastard to be quick, but he was too slow. That's when he sees our dear Layla, and oh, how we missed her. Where's your assassin outfit? You're so well behaved, my girl. He asks what she's doing, and she just says that thanks to his efforts, it seems no one was bothering her. The Shadow faction collapse, and there are several deserters like her. Obviously, he wants to know what her plans are. All sad, she says she hasn't decided yet. How about you stick with this little blonde boy? Wouldn't it be nice to stay by his side, huh? Layla is all emotional, saying she dreamed her whole life about this freedom, but now that she got it, she doesn't know what to do. That's why she just goes wherever she feels she has to and sees what happens. Our boy gets all emotional and calls out to her, turning around like he's going to give her a kiss. Ah, damn, it looked like he was gonna invite her to come along, and he says that if he had the chance, he'd go to the Holy Empire of Granada. She asks if that isn't the place with a bunch of mana artifacts and techniques that work specifically for women. He just replies that she doesn't have to believe him, but that it was the best option. She thanks him and says it's fine, that if she had one more chance, she'd like to meet him again. Man, wow, this boy is cold. He just thanks her and says goodbye, thinking to himself that it's a shame, but he can't keep her close anymore. That's because she wasn't even that talented of a person, not someone with exceptional abilities. Next man, damn Calix, cold and calculating. What's this kid? Ice cold heart. Look at her there, all pretty, turning away in her hoodie, waving goodbye, and off she goes. He just keeps thinking about how she said they'd meet again soon. Then he goes to Albie's grave and says he was the person who died more honorably than anyone else. That was the guy who took a hit in the back to save him. And now he let Layla go because her status window showed that her max level was very low. Maybe he needed to stop seeing everyone here as just a character in a game. Yeah, maybe that'd be a good idea, you bastard. You can't just let her go like that, man. How's the artist supposed to work now? But anyway, we've already cried for everyone who died and left. It was time to move on. I thought it was just him and Krot, but the whole gang's there. He says, let's go already, man. 3 days later, already at the border of Shikan territory, it seems Prince Gale's group had gotten close. That night, there he was in Shikan territory having dinner beside Russell, saying that this was amazing. Russell apologizes for his food being a bit bland compared to the capital, but the prince says it's fine. He was drinking a lot, surrounded by amazing people, so that was enough. It was just a shame that the successor of this place wasn't present. Russell apologizes but says that a letter arrived for the boy a few days ago and he had to leave. The first prince senses that they're kind of avoiding saying why exactly the boy left. He only got unsatisfying answers, but if he kept asking here, it would seem weird. Besides, Russell seemed like the kind of person who couldn't pick up on subtle things, so he says it's a shame because he really wanted to meet the boy. Of course, he also didn't want Russell to take it the wrong way. It was a pleasure to meet him. Russell just taps the glass on the table and says he's honored to hear something like that from the prince. The two stare at each other, and sometime later, Prince is yelling, saying he's going to get straight to the point. He needs full support. He knows that Shiken has already broken ties with the Kokurin, so in any case they already think they're allies, especially considering he personally delivered that letter to the king. Russell leans forward a bit. Man, a guy with so much muscle that just a slight nod makes them pop. The prince says either way he wants to know how they met Gerard, right? Obviously the first prince is trying to understand since Gerard said he was just paying off a debt or doing some sort of job. Russell, however, asks if he really wasn't informed. The guy gets caught off guard and says he wants to hear their side of the story, but it seems like he didn't like that. Of course, he, as the first prince, received the information, so it doesn't even make sense for the guy to ask this. What's driving him crazy is that he can't understand the intentions of this old man. Then Russell says he'll explain, including why Calix didn't come. He was sick when he got the king's letter. That's why they sent a messenger to inform them, but the letter never arrived. Gale tells him to explain, saying it's strange. But Russell just gives the lamest excuse, saying the guy who was carrying the letter fell off his horse and twisted his ankle. Right after that, Gerard showed up with an offer, saying he wanted help to escape from Servius, and saying that if they guaranteed his escape, he would forget all the debts owed by Shiken. With that, he received the letter to take to the capital. But they had no idea things would end up like this. Gale is just staring, thinking that unfortunately, he still can't find anything suspicious, which is super annoying. He knows Russell is a respected knight, but it seems that's all. He has no other exceptional talents. Now it's all clear, right? He wants to find out who it was that wrote that letter, knowing the whole plan. He's already sure it wasn't Gerard because that guy is dumb. And now, apparently, it couldn't have been Russell either. Not to mention that the last possible person in this place would be that Calix guy, but he heard that kid is always sick, so he's not even worried about him. Still, all he needs to do is take what brings him profit. With that, he smiles and says he's going to have to ask a question he already knows the answer to. Would Viscount Russell be supporting him? Obviously asking what the position of the Shiken family is in the succession issue, from first to fifth prince. The bastard is just staring, but Russell says that the family and the Count of Shiken formally declared their support for His Highness Gale Roch. Here he comes again with that crazy face of his, saying that's the spirit. Russell, however, says he has to give a slightly bold opinion. They had a request to make to the prince. He's a bit confused, and we cut to 3 days earlier. We see our Calix telling Russell that the prince would obviously ask for their support. In any case, they couldn't support the fifth prince, Seal. Russell says he understands since that guy seems to be the grandson of Marcus Antonio. Right, the one who caused all that mess with them. Calix, as that's part of it too, but also that they wouldn't gain much from that guy. Of course, either way, saying they'll support the first prince carries a lot of risk. Russell asks what the demands will be. Our boy says he wants them to no longer pay taxes on the merchant guilds in that region. Even in the game world, avoiding taxes is too good. Russell asks, confused, why he wants that if they don't even have a merchant guild in that territory. Our femboy's all sitting with his legs crossed, saying they disbanded because of financial hardship, but obviously that can't stay like that forever. Besides, the country is going to be divided into two factions, and even though both princes are powerful, each one influences their own territory. And if they're under the first prince, obviously they could ask for something like that. They would suggest 1,000 magical artifacts per year, and he knows the prince will try to play hardball, but in the end, he'll agree without much hesitation. Apparently, he doesn't want to pay tax on 1,000 sales, and of course, Russell says that's too little. But our boy says not to worry and to just offer it. He's got a plan. Russell replies, fine then. As always, the kid must have some unconventional plan that he just doesn't understand. Back to the present, the prince tells him to say it already. If it's something he can do, he'll definitely make it happen. Now the mustache guy was smiling. Everything was working out just as the young master had said. The next day, the boy is exhausted from riding all night right, so nobody could catch up to them. Krot, relaxed, tells him that they're almost arriving in the city of Pozniu, and then they'll be able to rest a bit. Our boy, though, has a sore butt from riding. My god, with that appearance already and saying something like that, peculiar. He tries to blame him for it, and Krot asks, who else are you gonna blame then? At that, our boy just tells him to shut up and stop being a pain. Krot laughs, saying a 15-year-old boy obviously would be a bit too sensitive. On the other hand, our boy is thinking that if he met the owner of this body, he'd beat him up for never training this crap. Look who's talking, huh? A guy who only runs away from training. At that, Krot asks why they're going to Pozniu when in theory they're heading to the capital. Calix says it's because he absolutely doesn't want to meet the first prince, so they're taking a different route. I ask why so much fear.